Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you that while Caitlin and Sophia are dietitians, we're not your dietitians. This means the information shared in the Food Freedom Fertility podcast is intended to entertain, educate, and inform. It is not a substitute for medical care. This information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes.
Welcome to another episode of Food Freedom and Fertility. We are super excited today because not only do you have Sophia and Caitlin, your besties in functional nutrition and fertility, we have another functional nutrition and fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, diabetes, you name it, research expert. She just is the queen of taking complicated scientific information and making it easy to understand and even easier to implement. So Lily Nichols, we are overjoyed to have you here again. You may have listened to Lily Nichols' previous two recordings with Sophia, but
and if you did, I'm sorry.
She is the author of...
This is my formal apology video for how awkward those episodes were.
She is the author of Real Food for Gestational Diabetes and Real Food for Pregnancy. She's created multiple institutes for learning for practitioners. She is like, if you want to learn something, Lily Nichols is the bomb at teaching it, whether you're reading it in a book, in one of her courses, or just on her research briefs and blog articles online. So Lily, thank you for gracing us with your time and your graciousness as we struggle through technical difficulties.
Yes, listeners, this is our third pass at this. We've had to press record and change platforms and do everything because my internet or microphone or something was just bad over here, but we've wasted all the good funny material, and now we're just going to boil it down to the bare facts so that you can get the information you need to make the changes you need to make. So we're talking about MTHFR mutation today. So Lily, take it away. Why should anyone care about that? What is that? Help us understand.
Yes. So, and thank you for the glowing introduction. I appreciate your compliments. I don't know if I deserve all of them, but thank you. MTHFR is a genetic variation or genetic mutation in a gene or an enzyme that's involved in folate metabolism. So if you happen to be one of the 40 to 60% of the population, I'd be one of them, that has an MTHFR mutation, you have some degree of impairment or a reduced ability to metabolize folate, especially in the synthetic form known as folic acid. So it does have an impact on, your body's requirement and ability to process folate.
So when you say metabolize folate, somebody didn't have like a nutrition degree. What does that mean? Why is that important when we're talking about conception and pregnancy?
Metabolize is a big word, isn't it? I need to move away from using the word metabolize. Your body's ability to use folate. Like, do you just have folate in this particular instance, synthetic folic acid floating around in your bloodstream, not doing anything? Or is it actually participating in the functions that folate should do in our body, which includes creating new cells and transcribing DNA? So like making a new human being requires a lot of the processes that folate's involved in. Maintaining like inflammation at a healthy level, your liver's ability to detoxify, that's reliant upon the processes that folate is involved in. Healthy vascular function and heart health, that's reliant upon healthy folate levels. Brain function, you name it, it's involved in so many different processes, but not all forms of folate are in a form that your body can easily use. And so if you're taking in a form that your body can't easily use, like folic acid, and then on top of that, you have an MTHFR variation, it's going to be really hard for your body to do all of those things. And a folate deficiency, or even just a functional folate deficiency, say you're taking in a lot of folic acid, but your body isn't actually putting it isn't able to put it to use, that would be like a functional folate deficiency, that can influence your ability to get pregnant and sustain a pregnancy, and can also influence the baby's development. So a folate deficiency can predispose a baby to neural tube defects, for example. So when the brain and spinal cord are first forming, they call it the neural tube. If you're deficient in folate, but also a whole bunch of other nutrients, there is a higher risk of that process not going right. And they call it a neural tube defect. So that can result in, like, literally there's like a hole in your spine somewhere.
Yeah, that's like people that you've seen with Chiari malformation, with spina bifida, with an open spinal cord. Instead of closing and sending all of those neurological signals down into the legs and lower body, it kind of curves outward and opens to the world. And we also see this hydrocephalus is also one of the potential side effects of having, or risks, and encephaly, which is like the baby's brain
fully formed brain or skull, which is very serious and often just, that's fatal. Usually fatal. So it's a pregnancy loss, right? So really, really dire consequences, which is why there has been so much focus on folate in the preconception stage, because you want to prevent these issues from happening. And the neural tube starts closing like day 21 after conception, really early on, sometimes before a lot of women even know they're pregnant. And so there's been this emphasis on like optimizing nutrient status preconception to help prevent some of these issues potentially.
And that's why folic acid became such like a public health push years and years ago, was understanding a relationship between folate and neural tube defects. So they started putting folic acid in large parts of just common foods everybody eats to try and decrease the risk of this. So this is probably one of the reasons why your doctor is saying like, hey, take a prenatal with folic acid in it. And if you follow Lily, myself, or Sophia, we're actually sending a little bit of a different message. Can you contextualize that a little bit for us, Lily?
Yeah, so let's back up a little bit, because I think we may have lost people on the different types of folate. So folate is an umbrella term. It encompasses all of the many different forms of folate available. There's at least 150 different forms that are naturally occurring in food, by the way. But the term folate also encompasses supplemental folate in various forms, and also folic acid, which is a form that is not found in nature at all, actually. It's only found in supplements and fortified foods. And they created folic. I believe the reason that folic acid took off is that, you think about how nutrition research works, where they're usually trying to distill down, like, okay, we did this intervention with this thing, but what was the one factor that explained the positive result? And they try to like distill down to the simplest sort of factoid. If you look at the chemical structure of folic acid, it is like the central part of the naturally occurring food folates or methylfolate or whatever. You're taking off various pieces of the molecule, and like folic acid, or what we call folic acid, is at the center of it. So they thought like, hey, this is better. Let's take all this junk off of the molecule and just give people the folic acid. It's also really inexpensive to produce. It's a very stable molecule, can withstand heat, for example. So if you add it to foods that are going to be baked, like bread, it will withstand that. It also is well absorbed in the GI tract, because your body does have to work to like take off these extra molecules and things that are on the end of food folates to absorb them. However, just because it's absorbed well doesn't mean your body knows what to do with it. Okay, so it's not metabolized well. It's not utilized well by your body. You actually have to go through extra steps and add some things back onto it for your body to be able to make use of it. And that really has only come to light in recent years, after we already started fortifying the food supply in most countries with high amounts of folic acid, and we started seeing some ill effects that some people thought were attributed to folic acid itself. And now we've started looking at, like, you can actually measure the types of folate in the body, like circulating in your bloodstream. And there's a whole bunch of isolated folic acid that your body's never made use of. They call it unmetabolized folic acid, or UMFA, if you go into the research. And if you're consuming anything more than, like, it's something like 200 to 280 micrograms of folic acid per day, the rest of it's going to be unmetabolized. Your body can't do anything with it. Furthermore, when you have people who have this MTHFR mutation, depending on which type they have, because some of them are more or less severe, if they have the severe type of it, they might not be able to metabolize really, like, only a small portion of that folic acid. So they're having, like, a folate deficiency situation, a functional folate deficiency, but then tons of unmetabolized folic acid floating around in their body. So it's like completely disrupting the normal process that folate should be participating in your body for keeping your cells healthy and helping you detoxify and being anti-inflammatory and all this stuff. It's actually blocking that process. So this is why it's just become so controversial these days, I guess. Certainly fortifying the food supply and providing some folic acid, like, there is a small amount of that your body can put to use, but there's also, like, too much of a good thing. And we're also all a little bit different in what our body can process. So it doesn't,
just as we say on here, that no one supplement is right for everyone. Well, what happens when they start putting it in your food supply or in your water supply? We see that, with other minerals and things that get added in, that the public health, the consensus is everybody should have this. And even if most people should have it, what happens to the person that isn't in that everybody category, and they literally can't get away from it? And that's part of what we see now. And I can see, when they started putting this fortification material in our food supply, food was different back then, and food access was a lot different back then. It was not the same as it is now. We didn't have, like, refrigerated trucks that could bring fresh produce year round. It was a different situation than we're seeing now. And I can understand the frustration, and it's, for us practitioners, we're like, okay, it's time for a change. We're not in those same situations anymore. We have a different world. We have a different foodscape than we did back in 1922 or whenever they first started discovering this problem.
Yeah, I think the fortification started taking place in the 1990s, actually, but
really, no way. It's got to be before that.
You would know.
You would know better than me. I don't know what I'm saying then.
I think it started in the 1990s. We did identify it, I think, I'd have to go back to my notes, but let me see on when it was discovered. I might not have put this in my notes because it's like an aside that is just sort of silly, but I think it was like the early 1940s, as far as I know, that they identified folate, or what they originally called folic acid, but the fortification didn't happen until a little later.
It's the 90s. Okay, well,
so Lily,
there goes my premise just now.
I've heard you use a couple different words, genetic mutations, genetic variations. You've also said it's really common in the population to have a certain level of these mutations. If somebody were to go to their doctor and say, have you ever checked for this? How are they checking it? What are they checking? When people get the results back and they hear something like you're homozygous or you're heterozygous, like, what are we even talking about?
Yeah, so it gets really confusing because there's, MTHFR you can have many different variations in the function, and they call them, this all gets like super big words for no reason, but they call them single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs. And you could have multiple places, or SNPs, multiple places where the genetic code is just slightly different from what we consider like the normal way. So there's been upwards of like 30 different SNPs identified in MTHFR. But there's some that are more common than others. And I don't even know if we need to go into like the different numerical
We don't. Basically,
notation for it, but
I can just speak for the listener. What does this mean for me? What do I do with this information? How is this impacting my ability to get pregnant? These are the questions that our listener has.
Yeah, so it depends on the type that you have. So there's like 3 types that are more common than others. You can have 1 copy of a genetic mutation. You can have 2 copies of that. So one's heterozygous, having 2 of them is homozygous. Or you can have what they call compound heterozygous, where you have 1 copy of each of the problematic forms. So it depends on which one you have. So some of them have had a significant known detrimental effect on fertility rates, like your ability to conceive and carry a pregnancy to term. And there's others of them that have a very minor or no impact on it whatsoever. So maybe we do have to get into the details. There's one that's like 677. That's a more serious one. There's the 1298 one. That's like slightly more mild. If you have 1 copy of each, that's the compound heterozygous. That's also somewhat problematic, but still not as bad as having 2 copies of the 677 one. That has the greatest detrimental effect on fertility. But ultimately, it actually, like, what's funny about it, and what I find a little bit annoying, like the whole conversation around all this focus around MTHFR almost doesn't even matter if we just switch everybody over to using the types of folate your body can metabolize. It doesn't matter.
Which are found in food, yeah.
Yes. So some of the of these, we have 150 different types of folate in our food, right? 95+% of it is in the form of methylfolate. Anybody, regardless of their MTHFR status, can readily metabolize that type of folate. 95 to 98% of the folate circulating in your body, in umbilical cord blood, so in your baby, in your red blood cells, so like incorporated into your cells and tissues, it's mostly methylfolate. Okay, so if we just give our bodies more food sources of folate, and then if you're supplementing or looking for a comprehensive prenatal vitamin, you take it in the form of methylfolate. It doesn't even matter what the genetics are. You know what I mean? You don't even need mega doses of methylfolate. You can get by with just a normal dose, and things normalize pretty quickly in people if we're just using the type that people can metabolize. But the problem we run into is that a lot of people are still eating quite a bit of these fortified foods. So the average woman in the US is eating at least 300 micrograms of folic acid from fortified foods every day, which exceeds...
and that pales in comparison to the dose that you're taking with your prenatal vitamin that you found at Rite Aid.
Oh yeah. And they know that too much folic acid is a problem. This is well known in the conventional sphere. They set a tolerable upper limit for folic acid specifically, synthetic folic acid. It's set at 1,000 micrograms because you get to that dose and above and you start blocking B12 metabolism and you mask B12 deficiency. So a person's B12 deficient, but you can't see because folate is kind of taking over some of the functions inefficiently, but they're making it seem like everything's fine, but it's actually not, and you're silently suffering from severe B12 deficiency. So there is a tolerable upper limit set for folic acid. There's no tolerable upper limit set for folates found in food or methylfolate. Again, because your body can easily just make use of it as needed, and it doesn't interfere with the function of other nutrients.
This is so interesting. Before we go any further, let's take a break and hear from one of our sponsors, and then we'll jump back into it.
We're taking a quick break from this episode to talk about one of our sponsors, the Prenatal Nutrition Library.
We love the Prenatal Nutrition Library. It's a searchable database and app, which means you have answers within seconds and peace of mind that what you're eating during pregnancy is both safe and nutritious.
It's almost like having your own personal pregnancy dietitian in your back pocket that's going to not only tell you, is it safe to eat this? How much of that should I have? Yada, yada, yada. But give you actual meal plans so you know how to put it all together onto your plate today. And the meal plans are trimester specific, meaning, some women are kind of nauseous in their first trimester, and maybe they need specific foods to help combat that. Prenatal Nutrition Library has got you covered. Or the fact that your baby's brain is growing rapidly in your third trimester and you need your nutrition to support that. Prenatal Nutrition Library meal plans has got you covered there too.
This is evidence-based information. Registered dietitians are in this app weekly answering members' questions. There's an exclusive podcast within the app that's run by Ryan, who is the prenatal dietitian that founded this entire thing. It's a wealth of knowledge and resources and will take you far beyond that one-page handout your doctor handed you that actually probably has out-of-date information about eating in pregnancy.
So head on over to the Prenatal Nutrition Library as soon as you get your big fat positive. Well, okay, first message me and Caitlin so we can do a happy dance with you. Then head over to the Prenatal Nutrition Library to get clear strategies to meet your nutrient needs, as well as to take the stress out of confirming what's safe and most optimal for you and your baby while you're pregnant. Use code FFF20 for 20% off.
Okay, we're back. So with all that said, Lily, getting back to the practical application of this vital information. So first of all, how do you know what genetic mutation or variation, whatever you might have, and what do you do about it? Like, how do we even begin to unravel this for ourselves?
So you really don't know until you get a genetic test, right? I had no idea that I am a carrier of one of these MTHFR SNPs until I got tested. And lo and behold, I found out. That said, did it make a difference for me and my ability to get pregnant and, all that? It actually didn't for me, I think, because I was just taking methylfolate and
taking methylfolate and not eating a lot of fortified grains.
Exactly. I wasn't eating fortified grains much. And so
I want to call them fortified grains because they've been loaded with folic acid.
So you might not actually, I guess my point of saying that is not to downplay that these can have significant effects, because they can. But not all people who are carriers are going to exhibit noticeable harmful effects. You might see some things on blood work, like other blood work, that may point you in the direction of maybe I should get this tested. Like you might
what are those things?
You might have elevated homocysteine levels, which technically is kind of like an inflammatory compound.
Mm-hmm.
High homocysteine levels are highly correlated with challenges conceiving, by the way. So high homocysteine levels can happen. That might not be the only reason, but it could be part of the reason. You could have, low folate levels in your bloodstream, not the unmetabolized type, but low folate in your bloodstream or low red blood cell folate levels could be a sign. And there can be other non-specific surrogate markers, like you may have had challenges getting pregnant, or maybe you've experienced multiple pregnancy losses, and that would be a sign to potentially get it checked. I mean, anybody can get it checked. Again, what you do about it is sort of like my advice holds true for everybody
the check
else.
process? It's just a simple blood test. Like you just go get a blood
usually
test.
Genetic tests actually can be like a cheek swab. It could be a saliva sample.
Okay.
Even. So you could do 23andMe or one of those genetic tests.
So if your doctor's not interested in helping you, you can pretty easily
do it on your own and then run your genetics through a separate analyzing thing to see if you have any of the MTHFR SNPs. But doctors also can order it separately.
So why is it, I've seen people get a lot of pushback asking for this, and the Academy, or what is it called? The American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology actually outlines do not test for this in women of reproductive age in your pregnant population. So can you maybe, I know you're not a gynecologist or in that college, but do you know a little bit about that? Maybe why this isn't recommended in those situations, why doctors are hesitant to test?
I cannot articulate why they would come up with that conclusion. I mean, they also seem to think that folic acid is the greatest thing
Holy
ever,
grail
and that methylfolate is totally useless. So all I can say is I don't think they have a grasp on, nutritional biochemistry. There is a lot of pushback in this space. And I mean, I had written like a very detailed article on folate and MTHFR and how it relates to, pregnancy on my blog, and got a whole bunch of pushback, which led me to put together literally a 2-hour webinar with fellow RD Ayla Varmer, all about folate and MTHFR and methylation in fertility and pregnancy outcomes. I mean, it's like for health practitioners. I mean,
yeah,
massive quantities of research. And really the only conclusion we can come to is that the people who don't conclude that this is of value don't understand the metabolic pathways and how they differ for different forms of folate. They just simply see them as, at the very least, equivalent, but they don't understand the differences in the biochemistry. And I also think if you don't really dive deep onto the genetic side of things, like if you're only looking at MTHFR as like one thing and not like a subset where there's all these sorts of different variations with different statistical differences on their effect on fertility and pregnancy outcomes and whatever, then you may just come to the conclusion that it's not significant. Because in truth, some MTHFR variations do not impact significantly your capability to metabolize folate and maintain healthy homocysteine levels and conceive and all that. But some of them do quite.
But we're here for the sisters who are struggling. Yeah,
exactly. And so I don't know why there's such a pushback on not screening it whatsoever. I mean, at the very least, it should be screened in women who've experienced losses.
And if you're unwilling to do that, at least give them accurate information about methylated folate or a food folate versus folic acid. And I think here
I've seen, go ahead.
Let's zoom out and just review what we've done, because I feel like there's so much complicated words and jargon. So I'm just going to kind of zoom out and help me fill in gaps if I say it wrong.
Okay.
So everybody has genes that kind of tell our body what to do, essentially. And everyone has MTHFR genes. Most of the population has like more efficient MTHFR genes at methylating things, which is basically just talking about putting a chemical compound-ish thing on,
changing the shape of folate,
changing the shape of folate or other things,
needs.
Right? It's not just folate. Other things get methylated, and you're either really efficient at that or you struggle a little bit. So zooming out, folate is really important for a lot of things in your body, specifically in the sphere of getting pregnant, staying pregnant, helping a baby's molecule or cells divide and do so in a way that is designed well and appropriate and healthy. You need to be having enough functional methylfolate in your body. What is offered to you in fortified foods and in most prenatal supplements is not methylfolate, it's folic acid. Folic acid is not an active form of folate. So your body has to take that, absorb it, and turn it into a methylated form to use it. And somebody that has some of these very common MTHFR variations, mutations, whatever you want to call them, whether you have one or two or a compound of two different ones, you may have a really hard time turning folic acid into folate. So you, even though you're taking a lot of what maybe your doctor and the public health specialists think is important for you to take, you're not getting it to an active, usable form. And so you can have a buildup of folic acid, which in and of itself can be dangerous for a number of reasons, but also can impact pregnancy outcomes. And so we're actually looking at the very basic, like most basic thing is we want enough of this active food folate, methylfolate in your body to do the job. For at least half the population, folic acid is going to be a problem, but it's cheaper and it's more stable. So it's fortified. It's added to foods that didn't originally have it. That's what fortifying means, right? We're fortifying foods with it to make sure you get enough in the general population. And then on top of that, most health professionals, unless they have some sort of additional interest in biochemistry or functional medicine who've been exposed to this conversation are recommending this thing that's not as good for most of the population. So whether you've been tested or not, a safe thing to do is to eat foods rich in folate, because all of that's going to come in a food form of folate. Very little, if any of that, would ever have a synthetic form folic acid in it. Okay. Or take a prenatal vitamin that has a methylated folate or something called folonic acid, which is a little bit different than folic acid. That
Folinic, yeah.
folinic, however you say it, folinic acid is a little bit different. So if we kind of zoom out, why your doctor may or may not test for it, who should have it tested for, it is an important question, but there is what Lily was just saying is like, it's kind of a funny conversation, because one of the simplest things we can do is just give everybody the active forms of it. And we kind of take away this concerning issue of having too much.
And then
to add to that,
burden of testing.
I think some people also looking at your genetic stuff and trying to like interpret what's going on. Even for myself, I feel like I'm like fairly well read in the area.
Definitely more than the average Jane. Yeah.
It's really overwhelming. And you look at all this stuff, like you look at my genetics and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at detoxifying, and I'm terrible at doing this, and I'm terrible at methylating, and oh, I have MTHFR, and you feel like, oh my gosh, my body is like totally
falling to bits. Yeah.
And like, I'm actually pretty functional. But when I eat like garbage, I do feel like garbage probably quicker than the average person because of that. But I can feel pretty darn good and be pretty healthy if I just eat well. The genetics kind of explain why that is, but
why you're an orchid and not a dandelion. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what we like to tell. Orchids. That's what we like to tell our listeners, because it's so easy. Because I know what you're feeling, listener. I know you're like, great, another freaking thing that's like makes me this, special unicorn person, AKA I'm practically disabled with all of these things that can be wrong with me. I know you're feeling that if you have a luteal phase defect. I know you're feeling that if you have PCOS. I know that you're feeling that if now you're hearing this other thing that needs to be tested for, and you need to spend money to look into it and all these things. But really what this could just boil it down, everything Caitlin so beautifully summarized, everything that Lily has been sharing with us today into this little nugget, is that you're an orchid and not a dandelion. You are a rare and beautiful exotic flower that needs certain conditions in order to bloom. And it doesn't mean that the orchid is broken. It doesn't mean that the orchid can never bloom. It just means that it needs the special conditions. It needs the right light. It needs the right moisture in order to open up and be the most beautiful flower we've ever seen. And some of you are just as beautiful, but you are the dandelion. And I know, and maybe that isn't you and you're not listening to this podcast, but I know you're thinking of your sister-in-law, your neighbor, your friend from high school, your friend from college, who like eats a Taco Bell and drinks a sixer of Dr. Pepper every day and has gotten accidentally pregnant with 4 kids that are healthy and strong. And here you are like measuring your brown rice, and you can't get pregnant for the life of you, and it feels completely unfair. And it could just be, she's a dandelion and you're an orchid. You just need the right conditions in order to bloom. It doesn't mean something is wrong with you. And like we're describing here, in my opinion, it's rather simple to start finding solutions and getting your body in the right situation to where that blooming can begin. So why don't we take another break, and then we'll talk about how to bloom in the next segment.
Hey guys, we're taking a break from our episode, and I want to talk about something that's super confusing. When you head down the supplement aisle and you're looking for a prenatal, and on the prenatal bottle itself, it says, do not take if you're trying to conceive, pregnant, or breastfeeding. Like, what the heck?
It says, talk to your doctor if you are pregnant, could be pregnant, breastfeeding, postpartum, whatever. And every supplement has this. You go down the supplement aisle, you go shopping on whatever supplement website, and there's a disclaimer on every bottle of every single thing, which means that everything that you've been taking your whole life long is now a big question mark about whether or not you are potentially harming yourself by taking something where you're trying to be healthy. So that is why we partnered with Needed. Needed is a perinatal nutrition supplement brand that has a wide array of products specifically designed for women who are pregnant, trying to become pregnant, breastfeeding, or postpartum. So it's not just that these products like can work if you're in that situation, or oh, it's probably okay if you take it while you're trying to conceive. No. These products are researched, they are formulated, and they are put together specifically for women who are trying to conceive, pregnant, breastfeeding, and postpartum.
This answers so many questions. I always get asked, like, what can I take? It's cold and flu season. What's safe? Needed has an immune support. That's safe whether you're trying to conceive, pregnant. It's even safe for your little ones.
And it's not just immune support. They've got collagen, they've got hydration support, they have digestive support, they have prenatal multi. They even made a line for dudes.
Needed is somebody we're really proud to be partnering with. So head over to their website and use code FFF20 for 20% off your order. Okay, we're back. And, you know, there's a lot of times where people say to Sophia or myself, and I'm sure to Lily, like, hey, but my doctor told me to take this. And we've had this conversation before about what's the difference between a dietitian and a doctor and why you do not want Sophia to perform your C-section, but
Nope.
why she is qualified to talk about folic acid and folate. Lily, can you give us just like a brief, like, hey, this is probably why they're saying that, but really you need to be listening to this conversation? And why are people so loud in this sphere about folic acid being evidence-based and folate not being evidence-based?
Oh, it's a conundrum.
I mean, you've spent your nose in research for years on this.
And I've spent a lot of time writing and educating about it too. Again, I think it boils down to, first and foremost, like just some historical happenstance in the type of folate that they chose to study and they chose to fortify in the food supply. It just happened to be folic acid. It is significantly less expensive to manufacture. And it has that stability aspect, which they like for fortifying in the food supply. And genuinely, and because of those factors, it is the more studied form of folate, specifically in the study for neural tube defects. Now, that said, it doesn't prevent all neural tube defects. So there's this little interesting factoid where 30% of women who are considered folate replete, like they're supplementing with folic acid, eating their fortified foods and all that preconception and through early pregnancy, 30% of them will still experience a pregnancy complicated by a neural tube defect. So they call that folic acid resistant neural tube defects. It's not just folate that plays a role in that process. So I just want to throw out that little thing, is that while population wide, especially when you're taking like the whole population, including people who are have very limited access to food and or are just eating a very low quality diet, you know, fortified folic acid is going to do something, right? Your body can use some of it, and some is better than none. So of course, population wide, it has some sort of a benefit. That said, I think the people who really push for the folic acid stuff get kind of siloed into this is the most studied form argument without considering the biochemistry argument, the MTHFR side of the conversation, and just, the difference in how your body utilizes the nutrient. I also think that because it is so much more expensive to use methylfolate instead of folic acid, like folic acid costs like $50 per kilo, where methylfolate costs over $13,000 per kilo. Those are 2020 prices.
Difference.
Huge so difference. Cost is actually more probably a lot more now, but that's like over a 200-fold. I'm bad at math, but something like that. over a 200-fold difference in price, right? So when you're talking about like manufacturing vitamins for as cheap as possible, and we know everybody wants to spend as little as possible on their supplements, and mass fortifying, all the enriched grains in the US are fortified with folic acid. So the mass enrichment program and keeping food prices as low as possible, you could see why they'd just go to folic acid. And now we're at the point where if you were to put together a randomized controlled trial where you have some women taking folic acid and some taking methylfolate, like nobody wants to do that study because it's too expensive.
It also
and it
feels
actually
unethical, right? Like,
and some people
experimenting on pregnant women is
Yes.
frowned
Well-
upon in our day and age.
particularly because if you do understand the biochemistry, we already know going into it, you're putting the women taking the folic acid at a disadvantage. And so if we already know that, why would we put those women and their children at risk?
Yeah.
Right. And then what's also silly is like, if we just step back on logic for a little bit, first of all, we don't know the mechanism by which folic acid reduces neural tube defects. Okay, let me repeat that. The biochemists, the neonatologists, the embryologists, biologists, they do not know why folic acid, at least in many cases, reduces the risk of neural tube defects. They don't know the mechanism. Okay, but we do know that if you improve a woman's folate status preconception, even if that is 100% through food-sourced folate, no synthetic folic acid, you also significantly reduce the risk of neural tube defects. So why wouldn't methylfolate also reduce the risk of neural tube defects if food forms of it do? And 95+% of what's in the food is methylfolate. Like, why can we not make that leap,
Well, so there's a lady out there. We were talking about her before we press record. Maybe we won't say her name on here, but there's a doctor out there who is loco, and her hill she wants to die on is folate versus folic acid, and she's on the folic acid side, and she has personally attacked each one of us on this podcast, and most of our guests, in fact, that we've ever had on this podcast. And so if there is ever a person who is staunchly dug her heels in on the side of folic acid or bust, it's this woman. And I have seen her publicly state you can actually get your folate needs through food, and supplementation isn't mandatory for everyone always. And I was like, you just undid everything you've been doing. You just stated
you're just stating that methylfolate works.
That methylfolate works.
She doesn't know. She doesn't know because she doesn't know the different forms of folate. She stopped attacking me, by the way, after I put out that 2-hour webinar, which I'm sure she never watched. She backed down on the. So, some of these people who are really loud on social media.
That was the week she found Caitlin and IDLF.
Yeah, maybe. They are paid shills of the industry, though. There are a lot of people on the interwebs who are literally paid to be influencers promoting a certain thing. Because you know what? You can't be right in the head and spend all of your time attacking people. Listen, there's like about 1 million accounts on social media who say completely opposite things than I say about prenatal nutrition. I don't spend my time like trolling the internet looking for people who disagree and starting arguments.
That is one of the reasons we absolutely love you. That's one of the reasons we absolutely love you. And I have structured my time online in a similar way, where what Lily does, listeners, this is really important, is she, instead of spending her time tearing down the person who's quote unquote wrong, she doubles down on what's right. She doubles down on, do you know what? I'm going to use my voice to say what I have seen to be true, what I know is right, what I can do to help. Instead of tearing down this fellow female practitioner who is likely just doing her best, she decides she's going to use her voice, her time, her platform, her expertise to educate on what she knows is right. She takes the positive slant on educating and informing even people like Caitlin and I, who spend all of our careers learning this stuff anyway. That is the Lily Nichols difference, everybody. That's why we love having her on the show. That's why we love her books. I'm telling you, I baby showers, your books. That's what you get.
Aww.
That's the gift you get from me. Anybody gets a GD diagnosis, your book. That's what they get from me. And that's part of why we just love supporting you and promoting what you're doing, because you take instead of trying to police the people that are wrong, I'm going to do what's right. And that is so needed.
You just got to take the high road.
She's a high roader, everybody.
Every single time. But also, like, kill them with science. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
kill them with science. Okay, somebody print that on a shirt.
Kindly. Yes.
I would wear that shirt. In fact, I'm wearing, listeners, I want to call you followers. I'm wearing my beef shirt right now because Lily, do you want to talk about where we can find some good food folate?
I was just going to say, let's play a game. Let's make this fun. And let's all just say a food that's like rich in folate. Take the seriousness out of this for a second.
Okay. You guys start.
Okay. I'll start. Beef.
Woo!
Yeah.
Beef meat, cow meat. Pick any part of the cow you want. It is going to have a lot of folate.
Bam.
You want to go next?
Sure. Spinach.
Yeah. So liver, got to throw out the organ meats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does it matter the animal?
They're all rich in folate. The poultry, like duck, turkey, chicken, do have more folate than like lamb, beef, pork, liver. Maybe because of differences in their diet, I'm not really sure, but it's slightly more concentrated. Giblets from chicken, which I know a lot of people don't like to eat, but if you're cooking a whole chicken and there's that like bag of organs on the inside, there's giblets in there. They can be,
you can make a nice gravy from it too.
They can make gravy. Those are rich in folate. Egg yolks are rich in folate. So any of those organ meats, you got, I usually go with the three L's: liver, legumes, and leafy greens give you lots of folate. So not all leafy greens are super high in folate, but spinach is one that's pretty high. Parsley, romaine lettuce, turnip greens, let's see, broccoli, arugula, avocado. I'm going off of leafy greens, but just plant foods. Asparagus is pretty rich in folate. And then as far as your legumes, lentils, chickpeas or garbanzo beans, black beans, even peanuts, which technically are a legume, those are pretty rich in folate. So if you're having crazy cravings for like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or something, or peanut butter on apples or whatever, go for it. And then some of our seeds are really rich in it too. So sunflower seeds, hazelnuts. So take your pick, get a big mix.
All right. Well, we were playing a game and then Lily just dunked on us.
Oh, sorry.
Just,
she just did go there. She just alley-oop that dunk. That was,
hey,
that
I'll
was
take
Lily.
it. We brought her on because she's an expert.
Didn't know we were continuing after round one.
No, we can't. You just won the game. Game over.
Okay, so that's food. What should people be looking for in supplements or not looking for?
Well, if you haven't gathered already, do not buy one that says folic acid on the label.
Period.
Sometimes they will write folate and in parentheses write folic acid.
Ain't that some shit? That's terrible. Yes. I see that on labels and I'm like, these clowns.
And that means what you're getting is folic acid, right? Because folate is this umbrella term that encompasses all the different forms, including synthetic folic acid. So on a good label, it'll say something like folate in parentheses. It might say methylfolate. It might say there's all different names for methylfolate. It gets really confusing. They're all listed in my article, but like methylfolate, 5 methylfolate, 5 MTH, folate, 5 MTHF, quadrafolic. There's all sorts of different names for it, but anything methylfolate is good. The other form that's also good, as we alluded to earlier, is folinic acid. So it's not folic, it's folinic acid. Also sometimes listed on labels as calcium folinate. And that one is also a good form of folate. So either methylfolate or a combination of methylfolate plus folinic acid is a good choice.
So just because we were kind of talking about this before, that some things are good for most, but not good for everyone. Is there anyone that needs to watch out for the amount of methylated supplements or methylfolate they're consuming?
There are some people that are sensitive to having too many methylated nutrients at one time. And this really seems to only have come to light after everybody started obsessing over MTHFR and then supplementing with like mega doses of methylfolate, because that's how everybody responds, right? Well, a little bit
It's
good,
so true.
better.
Suck it down like it's the fountain of, like it's the unicorn blood from Harry Potter, and it's going to bring you back from the dead, but you'll have a half a life, is what she's about to describe if you have too many methylated nutrients. Caitlin's looking at me like you are an idiot.
I woke up to a Harry Potter reel from Sophia. So.
That was so funny. The Italian Harry Potter, Professor McGonagall. That was so funny. Okay. I recently discovered Harry Potter, Lily, and
so she's living her like 13-year-old girl Harry Potter life through the podcast.
Everyone with my Harry Potter fandom.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. Anyway,
so
go on.
I've actually asked probably your listeners know about Dr. Ben Lynch. He's done a whole lot of education around folate, MTHFR.
We should have him on here.
You should.
Yeah, he's great.
We have very few dudes. So Dr. Ben Lynch. All right.
He can really get into the weeds on the metabolism and biochemistry stuff. So I've even talked to him, like, what's the mechanism going on? Like, why do some people have a really poor response to too many methylated nutrients? It usually shows up, by the way, as anxiety. People, if they're over methylating, if they're getting too many methyl groups, too much methylated folate, too much methylated vitamin B12, for example, then they'll get like anxious. And of course, I'm like blanking on some of the mechanisms, but we don't know for sure why it happens, but it is a phenomenon. So if you notice you start taking a prenatal or a methylfolate and you're not feeling well, Ben Lynch, his company Seeking Health, does actually have a methyl-free prenatal and like methyl-free options for supplements.
I've actually recommended this to people at times. And same thing. If you notice that you're having that same symptom when you're taking or eating a lot of beef liver, this can also be a part of it. I see people that have increased anxiety after consumption of beef liver. And then it's usually more the copper in the beef liver. Too much copper is causing a lot more anxiety. Insomnia can be another part of it. So I just wanted to put that out there because we were just saying that there isn't something that's right for everyone. And the same goes for this methylated B vitamins.
So for them, that folinic acid would actually be a really good choice instead of methylfolate. So, or a combination sometimes is enough, but also looking at your B12.
I was just going to say,
so
if
cobalamin.
You have a methylated folate, you likely have somebody
methylated
who's
B12,
choosing to formulate the product with the methyl.
You can look for adenosine cobalamin or hydroxycobalamin, and those would be non-methylated, but still bioavailable forms of B12. And sometimes that can offset or completely prevent the anxiety reaction that some people have. I'd say it's like a really small subset of people, but for the people who do experience it, it can be pretty significant. So you do want to.
Yeah. And that tends to be who's listening to this. It's the people that are, because even if 99% of people respond positively, what if you're in that 1%? What are you supposed to do in that situation? You're supposed to listen to podcasts. That's what you're supposed to do. And so we want to just say, hey, it's not you not, meditating enough or whatever. It could be that crazy. Yeah, you're not crazy. It's not a mental illness necessarily. It's, the fact that these supplements just don't sit right with you. And we see this all the time with, it's not everything is documented. Like just yesterday, I had someone who is in one of my courses and she's like, this is my second time trying my inositol. Every time I take it, I get so seriously bloated and my face gets so swollen. I get so swollen in my face from this. And I had never seen anyone have that reaction to it before. And so she stopped taking it and things got a lot better. So there we go. There's
It's
someone
just
who has
individuality there.
it's just individuality. And that's why there isn't like, if you're not responding well to minoxidil, you know what? Maybe you are someone who should be taking metformin. We can explore other things like berberine and white peony. There are other ways to combat insulin resistance in your ovary. And she doesn't have PCOS, so I was a little puzzled as to why she was taking it in the first place. Because if she's like, listeners, we know the deal. Like, you hear this podcast and you're like, must take every supplement, must do everything. I need to be pregnant yesterday. And it can be really easy to just start pouring these things down your gullet in desperation to have that healthy baby. And we want to tell you, slow your roll. You don't need to do everything today. Not every supplement's right for you. There are variations within every just individuality, like Caitlin just said.
Yeah.
So when we talk about individuals listening to this podcast, some are trying to conceive, some are about to try to conceive, some are here because they've been on this journey for 7 or 10 years, or they've had a lot of pregnancy losses, or maybe they're still listening because they're pregnant. Would you approach treatment or food choices or any of this conversation around MTHFR differently for people in kind of these different buckets?
I don't know that I would approach it all that much differently. Again, like some of the major warning signs that it's actually, in my opinion, worthwhile to test for MTHFR is if you've experienced multiple pregnancy losses. Like with some of these variations, there's a 2 to 4-fold rate. That's like 200 to 400% higher rate. Another way of saying the same thing, of recurrent pregnancy loss. So if you're in that boat, I feel like I would push for testing much more strongly. Whereas if you're already pregnant and like everything is going well, I don't know that I would push for testing quite as much, and instead just focus on continuing to consume the appropriate forms of the nutrients from your supplement and emphasizing folate-rich foods all the way from preconception through nursing, by the way. So yeah, I don't know that things would be all that much different. It really kind of holds true.
You can do more, because like I learned this when I was pregnant with my first. So not only do I think about it in pregnancy and postpartum and breastfeeding and all those things, but I think about it for my child, that I have heterozygous mutation, and so maybe one of my kids does. And so I think about how much processed refined grains that are fortified are they having?
Yeah.
How much am I seeing them eat these things? If I'm ever going to give them any type of vitamin, I'm going to choose something that's methylated. So it's not even just, hey, we're talking about you. We're talking about, you spent an hour with us learning about this, and now you're armed, if you are one of these people with the variants, that you can do better for your children down the road too.
It's hard with kids.
It is.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yes, because it's a lot of products marketed at children are the ones that contain these fortified nutrients. So think breakfast cereal. Those are the ones. Like, in fact, when you buy your prenatal vitamin, open up the container. What's that smell kind of remind you of? It reminds you of like a box of cereal smell. It's that fortification, grain fortification that you're smelling. Breakfast cereals, you'll find it, any enriched grain products. So we're talking like hot dog buns, hamburger buns, store-bought baked goods, anything with white flour that's been enriched, that's where you're going to find it most. And then any processed, like even like enriched rice, you'll see like white rice has this. So a big way to avoid this is eat less of these products. Just either choose the 100% whole grain version that's not fortified, or for a lot of our followers, what you've been doing is you've just been eating less grain in general, because you're working on balancing your blood sugar and having a muffin for breakfast and a 6-inch sub for your lunch and pasta for dinner like you used to have. You're realizing that that's really not meeting your nutritional needs, and it's sending your blood sugar into orbit. So a lot of people have cut back anyway, but this is, you can replace those foods with the whole grain version. 100% whole grain is what you're looking for. And read your ingredients list. it will say folic acid under enriched grain, and then it'll say in parentheses what they've enriched it with. And you can see that pretty clearly. So no, eating a muffin at your cousin's baby shower is not going to make you have a miscarriage. So please don't go crazy with this. But when we're talking about what your diet is consisted of day after day, meal after meal, cycle after cycle, eating a lot of processed grain, it's not really the best for your health anyway. And it could be kind of doubling down on the more dangerous parts because you could be consuming a lot of this folic acid without even reaching for a supplement.
And 85% of the grain intake in the US is from refined grain products, which by definition are made with white flour. And if they're sold across state lines, they're enriched. They'll be fortified with folic acid. So swapping out the quality of the grains you're eating is probably the biggest impact you can make in that respect. Because otherwise you're just taking in a lot of synthetic folic acid.
So it takes 2 sets of genes to make a baby. Do we need to be concerned about this with our male partners?
Yes. So men who have poor folate status or have poor folate status as a consequence of their MTHFR variation, they are known to have lower sperm parameters, lower sperm quality. So it does affect both. Absolutely. Like if you're going to go about testing yourself, or you're going about sort of refining the quality of the food, like doing a pantry check on the quality of the food in the house, definitely it's going to be worthwhile to either also check your partner and or ensure that he's also having the same quality of food that you are. It's hard with the men sometimes, like especially if you have a partner who eats outside the house for lunch, for example, and it's like sandwich or a burrito. People don't think about burritos, but like that tortilla is usually
a tortilla the size of a pizza crust.
Yeah, those tortillas are also like, I don't know if you look at grocery store tortillas, the ingredient list on grocery store tortillas is absolutely appalling. It's like trans fats, like
I know, it's so
grains,
bad.
1 million dose.
I see parabens. I'm like, really? You put parabens in this? It's like the stuff they put in like horse shampoo that you are supposed to be avoiding.
So many preservatives. It is off the chain. So yeah, if that's your husband where he's going and eating out for lunch and it's like a sandwich or a burrito or cheeseburger or something like that, really working on at the very least like
all the other
improving
meals.
the quality of what's in the house while he eats whatever he wants for lunch, or maybe you want to tackle that, maybe you don't, but every little baby step you can take on that to really just reduce the amount of processed carbohydrates. I feel like the folic acid portion of it is like a smaller worry of mine than just the blood sugar consequences of the refined grain intake, because that also has a very significant and detrimental effect on sperm quality. And then for women, you know, ovulatory function, egg quality, et cetera, et cetera.
Progesterone. Yeah.
So you're getting, you know, 2 birds with 1 stone there if you're working on that. And it's tricky, you know, speaking from experience where my husband often, you know, eats out for his work at lunch, you know, you do what you can.
Well, right. I'm impressed that he's eating when he's away from my husband. He won't eat. He'll like go to work and not eat. And then he comes home at like 3 p.m. He's like, what's for dinner? And I'm like, dinner is in like 3 hours, man. So
yeah. So have your lunch.
Yeah. Have your lunch. Okay. Well, we should probably start wrapping it up here because Lily has a premium on her time. She is the guru in all these things. And so many other people want to talk with her.
So let's take our last break and hear from our final sponsor, and we'll come back for Yeah Girls.
We're taking a break to talk about our sponsor, Fertility Cloud. In working with hundreds of you ladies, we have noticed a problem that has come up. I know it's come up for me, Caitlin. It's come up for your clients as well. And that is not only finding a doctor who is going to know how to help you, but one that wants to. We have a lot of issues here, and sometimes getting a simple blood test or actually getting a medication or talking to someone who's actually an expert in fertility can not only take an insane amount of time, but it can feel like you're fighting your doctor.
Yeah, or you're playing like Russian roulette to get in front of somebody who actually cares. We are so excited to be partnering with Fertility Cloud because they have a solution for all of these frustrations. Just last week, I had a client that needed right now care, and we couldn't get her in front of an OB. And she got a same day appointment with Fertility Cloud and spoke to a reproductive endocrinologist and had a prescription that she needed in her hand hours later. This is a solution that our industry desperately needs, and we are so excited to present to you.
So if you're in a remote area and you have to drive 4 hours to go see a doctor, or if you've been to multiple doctors and none of them seem to really listen or really care or want to take an approach that works for you, start up with My Fertility Cloud.
My Fertility Cloud has provided us a link, so check it out in the show notes. That will get you $25 off your first visit with one of their providers. And we're back. Who wants to kick off the Yeah Girl segment today?
I will. I got
Go.
a really good one.
Yeah, give it to us.
My mommy flies in today.
Yay!
Yeah. And okay, so my husband is gone for work right now, and I feel safe saying this because this episode isn't going to air for a little while. So the day that I'm saying it is very different from the day that you're hearing it. But my husband is retiring. He's retiring from the Navy, and I am so excited because he's going to be home with us more. He's not going to be destroying his body any longer. It's a mixed blessing because he is literally doing his dream job. He's worked so hard and sacrificed so much to be where he is. And it's hard for him to step away from, but right now he is gone on a work trip, and we are pretty sure this is his last work trip.
Wow.
And I've said this to Caitlin half a dozen times, and it has never been his last one. But this time, at this stage in the retirement process, with everything that he has got going on, we are fairly confident that going out on these trips, it's voluntary. The Navy isn't like, hey, keep going on these trips. He's just like, he loves what he does, and he's extremely good at it. And they rely on him heavily at his work, and he has a very important job. So it's easy to keep going and doing it. And then when you stop doing your dream job, I mean, even if, it's your last game in the NFL, like you want to keep playing because it's what you work so hard to do. And I'm pretty sure this is his last trip. Yay. So I don't think he's going to be leaving for a month at a time any longer after this. He'll probably go for a few days here and there to do various things, but everybody does that for work. So that's exciting. And that means my mom is flying out to help me and my kids for the next week. So I'm going to be very supported here at home. I am really excited for this process to be underway. And maybe once he's out of the Navy, we can have an episode where we do a big reveal and we
what
hear
the heck he actually has been doing.
What the heck he's been doing for the past.
This mystery man, show his face on camera.
Oh my gosh, show his face on camera. No one has ever seen the face of my Lord. No one has ever seen him. He is a mystery to all the followers because his job is sort of like cyber secret. Like he shouldn't have an online presence, and so he doesn't. But yeah, so that's my yeah girl.
Yeah,
Let's
girl.
hear it.
That's exciting. Yeah, girl. Yeah, mom.
Nice.
Yeah, Louie. Louie. All right.
I asked him if he hated that song recently. He's like, no, that song is cool.
My Bonnie lies over. I'm like, Fiona.
Oh, the Bonnie song.
Lily, do you have a yeah girl? I don't know if you've been on since we started this segment. It's just something to celebrate. What do you want to celebrate today?
Something to celebrate. I mean, I feel like mine is kind of minor, but
that's fine. Minor, major, anything.
Yeah, my garden in the yard is doing quite well, and I'm getting a crop of really delicious yellow cherry tomatoes. So
the best.
Yeah, we had a good year in the garden, and I planted fruit trees last fall, and I got 3 out of 4 trees gave us fruit this year, which
That's
feels
amazing.
kind of
Wow.
like a
So you
miracle
guys
for year
are,
one.
when last we spoke, you were, I think, in like Alaska short term.
I am
And
in
now,
North Carolina
now you're
now,
in North Carolina.
so I
Okay.
have a broader growing season.
That's awesome.
A broader growing season and a more permanent. I mean, if you're planting fruit trees, you're planning to stay there for more than a year or two.
A couple years. Yeah.
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 Awesome.
So
yeah.
I weeded yesterday. This isn't my yeah girl, but I just have so much like props for anybody that's gardening because this is not my thing. Like I'm never going to be that homesteader person. And I hear somebody like, I harvested and I'm eating the food. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. I want to be your neighbor. I want to take all the food you harvest and make it into food to put on the table because it's just never going to be me. And I like aspire to want to do that, but I will
Maybe your
that
kids will
all
get
day
really
long.
into it and they'll do it for you when they're teenagers.
Hopefully. We'll see. I like spent 2 hours weeding and I was like, I feel so accomplished because this is not my thing.
Weeding is oddly satisfying.
But also miserable.
Well,
Yeah.
it had just rained, so it was like things were coming out so easily anyway.
Oh, I see. I
Yeah.
love that. When I
I'm
used to live with Ed
overshadowing
and
your yeah
Vicky,
girl.
when I lived with Ed and Vicky, my job was weeding. I used to live with master gardeners who Caitlin
Yeah.
knows. She used to live near them too.
Oh, wow.
And weeding was my job. All right. Well, yeah, girl,
Yeah,
to
girl.
Lily's garden and those tomatoes. All right, Caitlin, what's your yeah, girl?
Well, about 8 weeks ago, Fiona got her ears pierced and we were finally at the point where we could like go buy her new earrings. And so we put new earrings in. And then yesterday we went to the YMCA and went swimming and her wet hair got stuck in her earring. And so she's like, can we take it out while I'm at the pool? And I said, yes. And I forgot to like force her to put new earrings in when we got home. So she woke up this morning and was like, Mommy, my holes are gone. And sure enough, literally overnight, they had already started healing. So we had a very intense conversation this morning about, it's not so healed that Mommy can't get the earring back through. It's not going to feel good. And she's like, I just want to let him heal. I don't want pierced ears, but she really does. And she loves them. So we very slowly but surely got one of them back through. And by the time we were done with that, she was like, I don't want to do the other. So I gave her time
to have
to calm down. Then we used a little ice. And then I distracted her with a popsicle at 9 a.m. It was like, here, eat this. And it was like so painful as a mom to do what I felt like was the right thing because I know she wanted it, but really didn't want to live through the pain. But anyway, it was a very stressful morning and we got it done and she's very happy now. And it was one of those times where I was like, I felt like the horrible parent forcing her to do it, but I knew it was kind of the right thing to do and like help her be brave enough for it. And so she's wearing 2 earrings right now. And I feel like
Yay!
I needed a glass of wine at 9 a.m. with her popsicle. But yeah, girl, not only are ears pierced, those holes are existing again, and she will not be taking earrings out and leaving them out probably for a very long time. I think she is like, yeah, girl.
Funny story. I can't remember when I had my ears pierced, probably 8 or 9 or something, but I went to summer camp where we had swimming in the ocean and stuff. And one of my earrings fell out. So I took them both out and they all healed up. And I was just like, never got my ears pierced again until I was about to get married. And I'm like, you know what? I haven't had my ears pierced in all these years. I need to get my ears pierced before I get married so I can wear earrings. And I finally got them pierced. And you know what? I still hate wearing earrings. So I almost never wear them, but the holes are there.
Yeah. I go through cycles of really not wearing any jewelry. That's like my most normal cycle. But I got a neighbor who's like a mom boss to make me logoed earrings. And then she went as far as like making me earrings in my colors. And so now I wear them a lot more, mostly because I'm just promoting my business. It's so silly. All right, listeners, we've got to go. We're so thankful you came on, Lily. Thank you for your time. If you like us, love us, follow, like, subscribe. Most importantly, please leave us a review so other aspiring families can find us too. And have a great day.
Hey, it's Sophia. If you love the show and want to continue your health and fertility journey using our resources, head on over to foodfreedomfertility.com for show notes, links to products and services, information about our guests, and our newsletter. Again, that's foodfreedomfertility.com. Thanks for listening.